Hey, this is David, pastor of Hamilton Life, and I want to thank you for taking a listen to our podcast. For more information on our church and how you can support the ministry, you can visit us online at hamiltonlifechurch.com. Thanks again for taking a listen, and we hope you enjoy the podcast today.
How's everyone doing this morning? Oh, the enthusiasm. My name is Keith Troop, and I am just so very excited to be here with you guys today. When I was getting ready to do this today, I was watching the Discovery Channel in the morning and saw this really cool thing on walking. And human walking is actually called bipedal locomotion. And it was really, really neat. And we don't actually do bipedal locomotion the way people think we do. We tend to think it's just this line kind of thing. And that's not how it works. We actually have about 10 to 20% of our energy going out to the side with each step. So we actually kind of walk more this way. And it's really neat because for a long time, they thought that this was a sign that we weren't created because it was inefficient motion. And so it was this really cool conversation. And by the way, if you don't believe that that is how you walk, go to the roller skating, and just kind of try and move your feet back and forth, and you will fall eventually. When you finally do get it down, what you're going to wind up doing is going out with this foot and then out with that foot, and it will push you in a straight line. And it will seem pretty natural to you because that is actually how you walk. And the next, for like the next 3 or 4 days, you'll have a wonderful lesson in your thighs about God's mechanics and how he works in our lives. So we find our legs actually arguing with each other, and it seems inefficient, but what we find out is that this system allows us, and it would be inefficient if all we ever did was walk in a straight line on a smooth surface for the rest of our lives. But we don't do that, do we? We turn and we go up steps, and we occasionally have to stop suddenly, and I apologize, I'm popping. We occasionally have to stop suddenly, and we occasionally have to make radical changes of direction. All those things are made possible by the fact that we're spending a little bit of effort in each step, coming out to the side just a bit. And if you don't believe me that this is how this works, we do have a doctor of physical therapy who goes to the church. So you can ask him. If you don't know who that is, just walk around and ask all the guys how bipedal locomotion works. And if they agree with me, well, then that's him. So this constant shoving match in our legs, providing an actual point of balance, forces in opposition, becoming the means of balance, not the disruption of it. Opposing forces bringing balance and control, and not that kind of hippie kind of, the universe is in balance kind of thing. There is no balance to the universe. There's one God and one creator of all. He's in charge of all of it. He's not sharing. If you want to see about the point of there is no balance, go into a dark room and light a candle. And you see one little candle defeats all that dark. Or go into a brightly lit room and open a can of dark. It'll show you right there. There's no balance to that. But what we are talking about is forces in opposition being used to balance us and guide us and take us in a straight line. Now, this doesn't actually have anything to do with what we're talking about today. Just an aside. It was Discovery Channel on Sunday morning. I get excited. I'm sorry. But it is just a brief little look into how God can use these two entirely different things if they were working together. It had nothing to do with the lesson. It's just two things, just very different things working together. Two things that are not the same things working together. Two very different things. Two different things working together. There we go. Okay. Clearly, I should have made those words bigger. We're talking today about grace and works. And notice I said grace and works, not grace versus works. We tend to make grace and works confrontational statements when we talk in Christian circles. And largely it just comes from one small area of the grace-works balance, and that's an area of salvation. So clear something up right away. In Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, it says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith. For by grace you have been saved by faith," or through faith. "And this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast." Good enough. I took notes in a different translation than the slide. I apologize. Every once in a while that's a problem, but that worked out well this time. By grace you have been saved. By grace you have been saved. And you'll see occasionally this conversation flare up still today. Is it just grace? Yeah, the saved part is just grace. Your walk afterwards is going to be a bunch of stuff. But the salvation part starts off just by the grace of God, just by his goodwill towards you. And that should be enough. Boy, okay. And before we get down on those older communions that kind of have this battle going on, it's important to realize that Paul wrote this down for a reason. He was communicating to people because apparently this was already a conversation. And the Jewish faith had a lot of works built into it. You do the right things, you go to heaven. That was not the plan with Jesus. We have also the book of James, which is just everybody's favorite book to read, especially when you aren't feeling like you're doing enough already. Then you get in there and it's like, James, and get off my back, okay? And but he is having this long conversation about the fact that faith and works, you can't really separate them. But so this was happening in the early church world. James was Jesus' brother. It's not like Jesus had been gone all that long before this conversation popped up. It's not like 500 years got down the road and people were going, I wonder if really we should be doing more works than it. He had just left. So salvation entirely a grace item. But then we wind up in this question, why are we talking about works at all? Why does this matter? Why does the balance matter? Why does any of this actually mean anything to our normal Christian walk? Well, in Ephesians 2, verse 10, which coincidentally follows right on verses 8 and 9. It was amazing the way that God put that together in the Bible. All the verses are in order. We see, for we are his creation, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared ahead of time that we should walk in them. Now, if you've known me even a little while and we've talked about favorite verses, this is mine. That word that is translated creation here, workmanship in the ESV and NIV, it's the Greek word poema. It's a fun word to say. Let's say it all together. Poema. There we go. That was not all together, but that's all right. We're going to work. We're going to move on. We'll work on that. There you go. So that's where we get the word poem from. And it talks more about this craftsmanship, this creative craftsmanship, than just, putting stuff together. This is not assembling IKEA. This is craftsmanship. You are crafted. You are designed. You are put together in such a loving and graceful and wonderful way. We find ourselves being art that was designed with a purpose. Still, not IKEA. There is work God has prepared for us to do, and if we don't get it done, we'll probably never die. That may not be what that means. But no, there's work that God has prepared for us to do. We have a purpose. And this is the really cool part about this. It's not just that God has created works which he prepared for us to do. It's God created works which he prepared in advance for me to do. There are moments when you are going to be the artwork that Jesus is showing off. You're going to be the point of interest in a cosmic conversation. It may scare you a little bit, but it should just thrill you to death, because if God prepared it for you to do, then he prepared you to do it. So you're going to walk onto the stage of the universe and do the thing God called you to do. Of course, doing works is easier to identify. I know when if I pick up chairs, I've done work for the Lord. I know that when I put my little fish bumper sticker on, I have honored Jesus with my works. If I mow my lawn, I'm just mowing my lawn. I just got to mow my lawn. If I mow my neighbor's lawn because they're sickly, well, that's a miracle anyways. But if I mow my neighbor's lawn because they're sickly, I'm working for the Lord. Taking care of kids, meeting needs at the church, those are all easy things to identify. Those are works. And because they're so easy to identify, we can get really wrapped up in them. It's like we can start counting off, oh, I did this, and this for the Lord. What did you do? It's not how that works. The important thing for us to remember is that Christians don't do our works for a reward. We do our works because we've already been rewarded. We've already been rewarded with relationship in Jesus. We've already been rewarded with relationship with each other. We've already been rewarded with salvation. So any work I do is not if I got to do that, fine. It's, hey, you saved my soul from hell. I'm on it. Whatever you need, I can do. But it's even more. It extends into that place of love that we have for each other. That it extends as we start showing the love of the Father in our lives. We start feeling his love for each other and acting in that love. That's where our works come through. The harder question is, what about this grace thing? What the heck is grace? It's really not that easy to define. It's easy to define. It's harder to go, okay, that specifically there, that's grace. That. In a rougher time in my life, I was heading into an alcohol rehab treatment. And I was angry with God for a bunch of different things. And while I was there, my very first day there, so I was still drying out, I was not pleased. I was not happy. One might even call me cranky. And I was there. I was out in this little gazebo because that's where they told me to be. Turns out you only have to be there if you want to smoke, but I didn't know that until 2 days later, after I'd already gotten the lung cancer. But I was there, and I see this guy making a beeline across the yard towards me, and I'm like, really? It's my first day? I'm going to have beef with somebody? I don't know this guy. He's ancient. What is this? And he comes across the yard, and he walks up in the gazebo. He walks right up to me. I mean, right up to me and says, "What does grace mean?" And I immediately turned to God and said, "You are screwing with me already. I have just got here, okay?" But I gave the good church answer. I said to him, "It's God's unmerited favor." What does unmerited mean? Yes. Means we don't deserve it. Okay. Why do you ask? Because that literally is the very first thing he said to me. That was actually the first thing anyone had said to me while I was there, besides people who checked me in. And he goes, "Oh, there's this girl here. She hates her name, and it's Grace." And I was pretty sure her name meant something. Okay. He goes off. Turns out he'd just come off a 20-year hard time sentence. For whatever reason, they sent him to rehab. I was like, okay. But he had basically destroyed his brain with several different chemicals. But it turned him into a very sweet guy. And we find out there was this young lady named Grace, and she was horribly, horribly bitter about a whole bunch of stuff. And later on I met her, and I said, "Are you the one that guy asked me about? You didn't know the meaning of the name?" Because Grace is such a common name. And she said to me, yes, I am. I thought for a minute, and I told her, well, when it's a name, it actually has a little bit different meaning, in that it usually means that the parents are saying that you are a gift that they did not deserve. She started to bawl. You're like, oh, crap. I've made the girl cry. Let's just go back over here and disappear into the woodwork. She was crying. And people were looking, and she was crying more, and people were comforting and crying more, and it turned out to be a rather breakthrough moment for her. I was still not talking to God. I was still very angry with him about some stuff, but she's having this wonderful little moment. Good for her. Grace and works prepared in advance for us to do. The unmerited favor of God is the textbook answer on grace. In Sunday school, you might have learned God's riches at Christ's expense. That's also a good one, also still vague. So we have all these words, but how do we understand it? God is awesome and incredibly cool. And as it happens, all of his good parts, he makes available in us, for us to demonstrate as well. So his love, we can demonstrate. His kindness, we can demonstrate. His grace, we can demonstrate. Is it as good as when he does it? No. But he's God. But we're his children. We're learning to do the thing that he does perfectly. So as his children, we should be displaying imperfectly the things that he does perfectly. Grace is one of those things, and that helps us because we can see how we demonstrate grace to each other. Sorry, my iPad had a different thought on what notes we should go to. I apologize. Grace is an aspect of love. It's kind of the motivated aspect of love, the aspect of love that says, let's go do something, as opposed to the aspect of love that says, boy, I just love them. When you actually have a good thought and a desire to do towards someone, that is grace. The simplest form of grace is forgiveness. If you can't practice forgiveness, you and God are going to have a talk, because that's like step one on the whole ladder of gracefulness and how he demonstrates his love to us. Mercy is when we don't give someone what they deserve. Grace is when we give something to someone who doesn't deserve it. Mercy is when we don't give something that they do deserve. Grace is when we do give something that they don't deserve. There we go. So in your life, you probably have examples of grace already. Think about that time you told your spouse not to do that thing, and they did it, and things happened, and it was exactly like you anticipated. Mercy is when you don't bust their chops for the next 9 years about it. Grace is when you say to them, it's okay, I trust you to do it again. I trust you to handle this situation next time without doing that. The new Christian comes into your group and they're just saying, crazy things, because sometimes new Christians want to fit in, and you're just kind of like, where'd you get that? And they just say something, and suddenly they step onto a place that you're like, oh, that's blasphemy. And you walk back and you're like, okay, no lightning, good. And you come back to them and you talk with them, and without telling them, hey, dude, you're wrong, you bring them further into the family by saying, hey, let me show you what God is saying to you about this. That's grace. Waking up on a Saturday morning and finding your child in the middle of a disaster, clearly of their own design. You can go with the, you little, I'm gonna, or you can go with the, okay, buddy, how did we get here? What happened that led us to this? Okay, what do you think we should do to get out of this mess? How do you feel like you should explain that to your mother? That is grace. Passing gas on the elevator and everyone pretends to not notice. That's also grace. get that one really fine point in there. The commercial where the kid is buying the Mother's Day tennis bracelet for his mom, the $5,000 bracelet. And he puts $2 up on the counter and he goes, will this be enough? And there's a dad behind him with the gold card. And like, yes, that'd be more than enough. Yeah. And she takes that from him. That's grace. One of my favorite examples, Iron Man 2. Not the whole movie. There's a little kid and he's dressed like Iron Man. And he's there and he's got his Iron Man outfit on and there's these robots have gotten all out of hand in this park. And this one robot comes down and this little kid stands in front of the robot and he puts his hand out like he's going to power blast the robot, only it's a little kid and it's just a flashlight. And the robot doesn't know it's a little kid with a flashlight, so the robot's like, whoop, it's a little Iron Man, I better kill it, you know. And suddenly Iron Man drops in right behind him, fires a blast, destroys the robot. The kid turns around just as Tony Stark's flying away and says, great shot, kid, and he goes off. And there's this kid going, yeah. What you don't know is later on he went to find his big brother that bullies him, was doing this at him a lot. And he said, why isn't it working? No. That is grace. Because we, imperfect as we are, try and look like God in ministry. And so often it's God doing the ministry anyways. And that's his grace. And that's such a powerful, when you get a hold of what grace is, that moment of action put to love, it just gets super powerful. When we give grace to others, it allows them to partake in humanity. We give people room to make mistakes. Suddenly they're a lot more capable of being in the group and working in the group. So when we give grace to others, it allows them to partake in humanity. When God gives grace to us, it allows us to partake in his divinity. And that's really awesome. So I wound up in a little conversation with God about the whole grace works thing. Because I don't understand why they get spoken together. I don't understand why they're shown together. My favorite verse, and it's all intermingled in there. And I couldn't quite understand it. So I asked God before I went to bed, and then I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was like God was sitting on the bed going, you cannot ask me something like that, then fall asleep. That is just rude. Because, man, he just came on. And I was like, okay. And the first thing I heard was they aren't separate. They're interdependent. And I was like, what? No, that's wrong, Father. That's not wrong. At which point God said, salvation is an act of grace. I said, that's my point. And he goes, but that grace is made powerful by the work of my son on the cross. Works led us to an act of grace. And that's where I was like, oh, okay, I start to get this. It's kind of like bipedal locomotion. There's this moment where I'm moving in one direction and then suddenly I'm moving in another. And so I'm doing works and then has some grace going. And salvation becomes this moment where God, the creator of the universe, looks on me. The creator of the universe looks on me and says, you are my child. You are forgiven. You are a co-heir with Jesus Christ and a prince and princess, just so nobody misses the point here, of the kingdom. You're a prince or princess of heaven, walking around down here on earth. I'm all these things only because he says so. But because the God who spoke the universe into being says so, I am undeniably these things. So are you. That is grace, his directed goodwill towards you. But he wouldn't have been able to extend that grace without the works performed by Jesus. And even then, Jesus would not have been able to do his work ministry on earth had God not had those grace thoughts towards us. Grace empowered the works, and works extended the grace. Because of that saving work, God's grace extends to me in salvation. Because I'm now saved by grace, I'm invited to join Jesus in the work. Step. I'm invited to join Jesus in the work. Because the good news is shared, that grace is extended out. I should have stepped further back on the stage before I started this example. Sometimes God sends you backwards, okay? No. Because the good news is shared, his grace is extended to more folks. Because God's grace calls us to be preachers and teachers and evangelists and parents and all the different things and friends and all the different things that God calls us to be. When we begin to do the work of God as he's called us, and as he leads us, carrying his grace to those who know only darkness and despair. There is no balance. That's good news. There's one God and Lord of all. And he alone is the solution to all your problems, all the world's problems. Everything that's on CNN can only be solved by God, not you staring at it, just so we're aware. You cannot open a can of darkness and expect it to diminish light. But any candle can push back the darkness. And by his grace, we are all candles. You shine because he says so. When we do the work he directs, we have the ability to become something more. We have the ability to get together to become a roaring fire. Broadcasting his grace and his goodwill and his love and his power to the farthest corners of the earth. The only ones left in darkness are the ones who demand to be there. When I was that guy in rehab, I would have told you that God had no purpose for me. But he'd already sent me there for a job he prepared in advance for me to do. He's that good. He knows how to get us useful even in the places where we have really screwed up our lives. I know there are people in the room who feel like God couldn't use them. Okay, let's be honest. There are people in the room who think God can't love them. So, because you think you can't be loved, you think you can't be used. Both are wrong. You are loved. God's goodwill is directed towards you. Every promise and every blessing is for you. The Bible's a great book. You can read it and say, hey, this is the good news for you. But most of us do that one and forget to go, hey, this is good news for me. It's good news for you. So we're going to take a moment and we're going to think on this. I want you to just pray and say, God, first off, remind me how much you love me. Because he always wants to have that conversation. Second, let's ask God, how do you want to use me? And he may answer you today, maybe a couple days down the road. But God is excited about the things he has designed for you to be a part of. There's also communion available in the back. Sorry, I feel emotional. There's also communion available in the back. I invite you to partake of that. Or just sit quietly and think on it for a minute. And then David's going to come back up. Thank you all.